Hello and welcome everyone to the Friday, October 10th, 2025 episode of On Iowa Politics. This week on the podcast, we'll discuss the Des Moines Superintendent situation, the federal government shutdown, and Mariannette Miller-Meeks talking town halls. And also stick with us to the bitter end, folks, because we have a big programming announcement to share. That's what folks in the business call a tease. We hope to keep you around. Hello, everyone. I'm Erin Murphy, the Des Moines Bureau Chief for the Gazette in Cedar Rapids. We've got the full roster, which we need because we missed last week and we got so much to talk about, and everybody's here to do it. Gazette Deputy Bureau Chief Tom Barton is here. Hello, Tom.
Hey, Erin.
Tom and I, just for the benefit of listeners, if all of a sudden we come to blows during the podcast, it's because of the Brewers-Cubs series. It's not because of anything else about work. It's fine otherwise. Lead Des Moines Bureau Chief Maya Marchel Hoff is here. Hello, Maya.
And I will also be staying out of that attention this week.
Coward, Maya. I know you have Wisconsin blood. Doggone it. Sarah Watson of the Quad City Times is with us. Hello, Sarah.
Greetings, Erin.
We have Jared McNett of the Sioux City Journal here, who has no baseball allegiances here.
Not right now, no, Erin. And I want to say a fond farewell to our longtime editor, Bruce Miller, who we wish well in semi-retirement for now. And then a best of luck to our new interim editor, Dave Driesen.
That's right. Echo that 100%. Folks who know my history, first of all, why would you? What's wrong with you? But if you do, I was in the lead job before this, and obviously know Bruce well. Love Bruce to the moon and back. Congratulations, Bruce. What a great guy, and hope he enjoys his semi-retirement. I heard that he's still gonna do a little work on the entertainment beat, so that's great.
Can't quit it altogether.
There we go. Perfect. All right, Gazette columnist Althea Cole is with us. Hello, Althea.
Hi, I was at a bar last Saturday watching the Cyclone game, and the Cubs-Brewers game was simultaneously on. And apparently at this bar, everybody gets the free something called a cherry bomb if the Cubs score, and everybody got exactly one cherry bomb. So that wasn't that exciting.
That sounds like a wonderful day to me. Oh, I love it. And Gazette columnist Todd Dorman rounding out the roster. Hello, Todd.
Hello from beautiful, historic North Marion. Some of these houses are almost 25 years old. So, and I mean, you just don't see this kind of beige anymore.
Whether you want to or not. All right. So we obviously have to start this week with the huge news about the former Des Moines Public Schools Superintendent, Ian Roberts. This is our first chance to discuss that huge news on the podcast, because the story first broke 2 weeks ago, like shortly after we recorded that week's podcast. And then last week, loyal listeners will know we were off for the Gazette's Iowa Ideas Conference. And so here we are 2 weeks later, and we're all finally able to talk about this. Although, honestly, for as often as this story has changed and new information coming in so rapid fire in these last couple of weeks, maybe it's a good thing that we're just now getting to it. In fact, just today, we've got a new story out. I see the Associated Press reporting about Mr. Roberts appearing to have kind of coaxed some school district business to a consultant firm that he had connections with. So, man, it's just been remarkable. I'm going to lean on our columnists, Todd and Althea, to get this ball rolling. But real quick, first, I want to start, Jared, with you, because even out in the Sioux City Journal, you guys wound up with a role in reporting on this story at one of the many shifting moments. It started with Ian Roberts being jailed. Well, apparently he was very briefly in Council Bluffs and then sent to Woodbury County Jail in Sioux City. And then, Jared, one day that changed. So tell us all about that process of you guys reporting that story.
Yeah. So there was, like you said, there was confusion about the location he was in when he first got booked on the 26th. He was listed for a time as being detained in the Pottawatomie County Jail. That was then kind of refuted by the folks down there. When he finally got here, the charge given was warrant foreign. On that subsequent Saturday, we had a protest of about 30 plus people. The sheriff's deputies put barricades out in front of the jail where Ian Roberts was at. They had a sniper rifle up on the roof. And we had some Facebook commenters on our story hoping that the sniper rifle would take some target practice. So that was really encouraging to see from the local community. Yeah, he wasn't the only ICE detainee that the Woodbury County Jail has. The LEC here has made a point of having other ICE detainees. And then on the on October 2nd, we had our story up about Ian Roberts no longer being in the jail. And actually, very proud of this. We had the story up before the sheriff actually had a statement about him being removed from the jail. And again, even with that, there was some confusion about where he was going. Even after his name no longer appeared on the jail roll for Woodbury County, the roster on the ICE website still had him listed as being there. We then were searching a number of different jails, as I'm sure a number of other papers were as well, trying to figure out where he was going from Sioux City, and could not find that information right away. The only statement that we got from the county sheriff was pretty terse, and it said, in part, Ian Roberts is no longer in custody of the Woodbury County Sheriff's Office Jail. Can't get much more of a simple statement than that. And just talking to people when the protest happened that Saturday after he was booked. Obviously that was before a lot of the details kind of came out about Ian Roberts' past. So some of the statements, maybe some of those people would want to take back. But a few of the statements from some people were more concerned with process as much as anything. And they took issue with the fact that it had to come to him like fleeing or allegedly fleeing the scene was kind of the point that they were making. And they thought there should have been a better process with all of this. So, yeah, that's kind of our part in all of this.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned that moment, Jared, when you guys reported that story that he was no longer there, and then there was kind of a gap, and I don't remember how long this lasted before we ultimately knew that he had been taken to Polk County Jail to face federal gun charges, but we didn't know that right away, however long that was. And I remember, the speculation was, had he been deported maybe, and we hadn't heard that yet. I remember that sort of pause in the timeline there.
Well, and that's happened with other like notable ICE detention cases over the past couple months of people not knowing exactly where some of these people are headed, or there being these lags in where people are at from one moment to the next.
Yeah. All right. So, and like I said, I wanted to bring Jared in really quick because that two things. One, highlight their great reporting in Sioux City, and also just kind of shows the breadth of the story and what it's been over the last couple weeks. And I want to spend some time on this today. So Todd, let's bring you in now. There are a million and maybe literally a million different questions I could ask you about this whole thing. So I don't even know where to start. I'm going to take the coward's way out and just invite you to get us rolling here with your big picture thoughts on this whole thing.
Pass?
No.
Can I do that? Okay, no, I can't.
That's fair.
Well, I think one aspect of this is that you can simultaneously look at two threads of this case. There's, of course, the appalling dishonesty that Ian Roberts basically used to get employment, to burnish his academic background. All of those things. He shouldn't have had a gun. I think that's clear from the federal charge, because he was an undocumented immigrant, which I guess he was hoping no one would find out, which didn't work out. And I think the people I've talked to in Des Moines who basically say this guy was a really fantastic educator who brought a lot of attributes to the job. He was not above working one-on-one with students at all levels. He went out and actually tried to find kids that weren't going to school. He would go and thank staff members. Everyone sort of liked him and wanted to be around him. And well, until he was detained by ICE, and then everyone sort of scurried away. So that's the sad thing about it. I mean, you've got this criminal academic dishonesty track, but you also have this. Here was a guy that apparently, I've never met him, and I don't live in Des Moines, but apparently was this, one of a kind superintendent that they may not be able to hire anyone like that again. So,
Yeah, I'll just really quickly add to that, Todd, because I am here in Des Moines. Look, I don't cover the Des Moines school district, so there are people who know Des Moines schools far better than me. I'm not claiming to be an expert whatsoever, but I will just kind of to bolster what you said. That's the same thing that I've heard from anybody I do know around the schools, and I would have told you this before this all happened too. If anybody had asked me about Ian Roberts, is he seemed to be popular in the school district. He see parents and students largely seemed to like this guy. And I don't say that to say that anything that he's done is excusable, et cetera, et cetera. I'm just, to Todd's point, this is a complex situation. And we learned for the 5 billionth time now that human beings are complex creatures and not as simple as the black and white heroes and villains that sometimes we might wish, and sometimes people might portray them to be. I just point that out for the record.
Well, it's left a lot of parents and kids sort of stunned, but that's his fault. I mean, he was hired under some false pretenses and had to know that eventually something like this could happen, and it did, and it's harmed a lot of people. They still admire him, but it's caused some heartbreak. Mm-hmm. The other thing I think this raises is there any way we can have an immigration system that falls somewhere between, some guy completely falling through the cracks and, nothing is done, and ICE pulling up in vans and throwing people inside? I mean, is there something in the middle that we could possibly have where we, actually do a better job following these cases and also do a better job of, figuring out ways in certain situations to that there might be other remedies, but no one in politics seems to have an appetite for that, or at least not. Republicans control everything, and even the Republicans who support immigration reform are frightened of the Republicans who will scream amnesty the minute they sign on to a bill. So we need to solve the political problem, because it's going to lead to more situations like this, and we need to have an immigration system that takes care of its business and also is probably more compassionate.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for that, Todd. Althea, sort of basically same to you. And I know you wrote about this as well. Our superstar producer extraordinary, Bailey Chian, will put that link in the YouTube version of this for everybody. Althea, give us your sort of big picture thoughts as you've digested all this over the last couple of weeks.
What I wrote about last week was that this situation has blown up a lot of arguments, in the political sphere itself. This is about so much more than just a school district with over 30,000 students learning something shocking about somebody they trusted, and that person losing their job. We'll go back for a second to, is it possible to have a kinder immigration system where we don't need agents pulling up in vans or other unmarked vehicles? And Ian Roberts unfortunately showed us that day why we aren't often able to offer that courtesy. He was ordered out of the country. We know he received the paperwork, or at least we can assume reasonably that he received the paperwork saying, you are not eligible to be in this country. You must leave this country, because it was found on underneath a mat in the floor of his vehicle when his home was later searched. As for other reasons for a kinder, gentler immigration enforcement, Ian Roberts evidently chose to speed away when he was pulled over for a traffic stop. So unfortunately, he's showing us the uglier side of the immigration system and why sometimes that ugliness can't be avoided. It definitely is a tragedy, but I don't have any other ideas for how you can detain somebody who is not only not eligible to be in this country, but ordered removed from the country if they are not voluntarily coming to say, okay, I'm out of here, or if they are not willingly going with the people who come to escort them out of the country. Some of the other arguments that have been blown up here, what I wrote about last Sunday, this, whether people like it or not, this kind of reopens a debate that has been had in Iowa for the last couple of years now. In 2023, Iowa passed education savings accounts, which is colloquially known as school choice. Other people like to call it vouchers. And one of the biggest arguments against letting students use their portion of state education investment and directing it to a school that best fits their needs is that only private schools deserve to have a portion of state educational dollars directed its way, because only private schools have the appropriate transparency and accountability. Well, unfortunately, we're seeing so far what transparency and accountability means for the Des Moines School District as it relates to the case of Ian Roberts. And it's not always it's definitely not the most pleasant thing. Transparency for the Des Moines School District meant that they selected Ian Roberts in a completely closed door process. We don't even know if other candidates were considered, or at least if the board was able to consider other candidates based on the consulting firm they used and have paid a lot of money to. Now, the board is since saying, this consulting firm that we used, they're alleging that they were negligent. They were alleging that they breached the contract. This is now becoming a court case. And so far, the consulting firm has shot back and said the Des Moines School District selected this person knowing that there was information on the resume that we alerted them to that was not accurate. So that's going to be an interesting discovery process when the case continues in court. And we might learn some new things about the district's role. We might learn some new things about the role of consulting firms. And we're learning that with new Associated Press and other reporting that's coming out. But transparency and accountability isn't looking as superior to other systems as perhaps defenders of the previous public school system have said. Again, it's seen as superior to private schools and charter schools that school districts have an elected board doing their operations. But when it comes to accountability, it means that voters basically have one shot to replace a board member if they are not satisfied with the leadership that they have shown. What I pointed out in my article last Sunday is that of all of the people who voted to use the consulting firm, to go with this closed door process, and ultimately to hire Ian Roberts, not everybody is still on the board. You've got some who are not running for re-election, such as board chair Jackie Norris, who is running for the Democratic nomination for United States Senate. The person who was chair at the time of Roberts' hiring has unfortunately passed away. Another person, Jenna Knox, she's opting not to. She had already planned on not running for re-election. So ultimately, of all of the people who voted to hire Roberts, only one is actually up for re-election this year, and that person is running against two other people for 2 at-large seats. Who gets to hold a school board accountable? It's not just the stakeholders, aka the parents and the students of Des Moines Public Schools, because in the public school system, it's more of a shareholder type deal. And that's how school boards are chosen. They are chosen by only the residents of the district. This reopens that discussion of which kind of accountability is better. Is the public system entirely superior, or perhaps was it not as good? And do we need to, what needs to be done to hold the Des Moines School District accountable for hiring this person who by some accounts appears to have been hired based on characteristics other than academic excellence and credentials. So there's going to be a lot that continues to emerge in this story. I don't know how long this is going to stay in the news cycle, but I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon.
No, I agree with that. And to your point, I mean, a lot of this is going to be hashed out in court too. So, I mean, and discovery, all that stuff, there's going to be so many new things that we'll continue to learn for so long here.
Ultimately, one big question I have is does the district go from here? Are they going to privately admit whatever mistakes they may have made to themselves? Because sooner or later, the Des Moines School District is going to hire a new superintendent. They recently approved a contract for the interim superintendent, who was the associate superintendent. But sooner or later, when they do hire a permanent superintendent to succeed Ian Roberts, are they going to do anything differently? And what would different look like if they do?
I've seen a lot of these, professional search firms hired. And I've always thought it was a sort of a shady game, because you've got these companies that come in and say, this has to be confidential because we don't want the applicants to get outed to their current school district, which I think, who cares? But they seem to think, and they think that's important because they offer up the same pool of superintendents to a bunch of different school districts. It's a very cozy sort of revolving door process. And in some cases across the country, you've seen search firms get superintendents hired, and then that search firm is affiliated with a consulting firm that then is hired by the school district to do, various educational things, which I don't think that was the case with Robert's consulting work that came out today. I don't think that they had this firm had any ties to JG and Associates or whatever the search firm was. But
Yeah.
I just think school districts should stop. At the very least, they should find search firms that want to do this in the wide open, or figure out a way to do this without hiring those companies, because I think a lot of times it doesn't result in a good fit. And, obviously we know now that maybe the vetting isn't what at least that the Des Moines School Board hoped it would be. So I think that's the conversation that needs to be had in education is, do we keep hiring these folks?
Yeah, and I will say, and Jared, it looks like you're ready to say something. I'll come to you next. To that, the early discussions with legislators and things we're hearing from legislators, if there's one area that's going to get a real close look at that when the legislature convenes next January, it's the hiring process, writ large, and do certain things need to be required of school districts when they're hiring this personnel. We saw Governor Reynolds this week issue the requirement that all state agencies use E-Verify program now to confirm state workers' employment and residency status. I assume that debate's going to be coming back as well.
I was just going to throw in a teaser to what Erin said about debate on hiring practices and E-Verify in the coming legislative session. Check out Sunday's Cedar Rapids Gazette.
Always be hustling. That's right. You can watch for a story. I knew about that too. Good job, Tom. Okay, now that we're done advertising, go ahead, Jared.
Althea mentioned when she was talking, she mentioned Jackie Norris and how Jackie Norris is running for Senate. And I was thinking about this, and a more robust or muscular state party, be it Democrat or Republican, if you had a candidate who was caught up in something that has drawn this kind of heat, you would meet with them immediately and tell them, pack your bags and you need to get out of the race ASAP. And that's nothing on Jackie Norris, like as a candidate or anything else, other than just you can't.
A political reality thing, right, Jared? Yeah, that's the point
you're
making.
Function when you have like this kind of issue that's now connected with you, rightly or wrongly.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me that that hasn't happened with the state party and her campaign.
I haven't taken a look at internal polling, but I would almost suggest that it might help her. I mean, we'll find out if I'm, right or completely wrong about that. But she's gotten a heck of a lot more publicity, arguably, than she had previously. And I mean, even people who feel let down by Dr. Roberts, not everybody can admit that. And I just referred to him as Dr. Roberts. We don't even know if the
Yeah.
doctorates are real.
No, I've been trying to train myself the same thing, Althea. Don't say doctor, say Mr.
I know. I was trying to
Yeah.
train myself very
Yeah.
hard to say Ian Roberts, and then
Yep.
poof, I slipped up and I gave a dubious honorific there. But yeah, my understanding, I did take a look at one poll. Norris is only slightly behind
Zach Walls.
Zach Walls. Thank you.
Yeah, that was I can't remember. I saw that. So I can't remember where that internal poll came from. I saw that in my inbox at 1.2. That is. I've talked to people behind the scenes about that too, Jared. That's a really interesting point. We'll see what ultimately comes of that.
Yeah, well, and
campaign.
To Althea's point, even if it somehow helped her in the primary, it wouldn't help her in the general. I wouldn't imagine. So that would be all the more reason for a state party to say pack it up.
Yeah, the ads will write themselves. I mean, you can just see what's going to happen. Even if this hadn't happened, I would be surprised if she turned out to be the nominee. But I guess a lot of Democrats in the Des Moines area think she's the front runner, and that's that's why we keep.
I was going to say
keep nominating Des Moines people because
and the Des Moines Democrats have a great track record.
In the state too. They got
and she's got a lot of national connections from her time as
Yeah.
Michelle Obama's chief of staff.
She does, but this is. I guess she can stick around, but I think this is probably a fatal flaw.
Well, obviously, like we have established, this story is going to live on. So while this was our first chance to talk about it, I know it's not going to be our last. We've got more unfortunate news and sad news from the Iowa legislature to talk about real quickly this week. State Senator Claire Celsi, a Democrat from Des Moines, passed away. She was just 59 years old. She'd been ill and was in hospice care recently. So it wasn't necessarily unexpected, as obviously sad and tragic as it is. Maya, you wrote the story for us on this. Tell us a little bit more about Senator Celsi. And man, this is I think if I'm right, this is the third state legislator that's passed away this past year.
Yeah, that's right, Erin. Senator Claire Celsi of West Des Moines, she passed away on October 6th, on Monday, making her the third state lawmaker to pass away. Earlier this year in January, Representative Martin Graber of Fort Madison passed away from a sudden heart attack, and then Republican Senator Rocky DeWitt of Lawton passed away from pancreatic cancer in June. So this makes her the third lawmaker to pass away, and also this will create the sixth special election this year. Obviously, 3 of those are from lawmakers dying, and then 3 are from other lawmakers being shifted to different positions, including Mike Sexton, Sammy Sheets, and I know I got
Cournoyer?
it. Chris Cournoyer. There we go.
Lieutenant Governor.
Yes. There we go. But a little bit more about Senator Celsi. She passed away at the age of 59. She entered hospice care on September 18th, according to her family. And then earlier this week, her daughter posted on social media confirming her death. Her health issues don't come as a surprise. She ended up missing a significant portion, if not a lot of the first portion of the legislative session this year. She did end up coming back near the end to cast votes on final bills coming to the floor, but she was out for an undisclosed ailment. So we don't know what that was. She never disclosed it. But she represented, she's a native of Des Moines. She represented Iowa Senate District 16, which covers parts of Clive, West Des Moines, and Windsor Heights since 2023. And then before it was redistricted, she represented Iowa Senate District 21, starting in 19. Celsi served as the ranking member on the Iowa Senate Government Oversight Committee since 2021 and served as the Senate Democrat Assistant Leader in 2024. She also owned her own consulting firm and was heavily involved with the West Des Moines Democrats, I think, since the group's creation. She's survived by 2 daughters and 2 grandchildren. And after news of her passing on Monday, a lot of lawmakers on both sides of the aisle came to offer their support and prayers for her family, as well as commend her for her time in office. Senate Minority Leader Janice Weiner said she admired Celsi's perseverance and determination to continue to serve her constituents. And she kind of added in, including on the last day of the 2025 legislative session, which, if you know how long that lasted, it was about 20 hours. It went into the early morning hours. We also got a statement from House Minority Leader Brian Meyer, who said similar things. Governor Kim Reynolds also extended her prayers to Celsi's family, and a couple other Republican leaders, including Iowa State Senate President Amy Sinclair, called her death heartbreaking, and Senator Mike Klimisch, new majority leader of the Iowa Senate, called her a dedicated public servant. So
yeah,
getting folks from both sides of the aisle mourning her loss as we still mourn the loss of the other lawmakers who passed away this year.
Yeah, man. Hopefully that's the last one of those that we have to talk about for a while. It's been a tough year. Very unfortunate. All right, moving on. Other big news this week is the federal government shutdown. We remain in the throes of that as we sit here and record at roughly 4 o'clock on Thursday afternoon. Didn't sound like we're super close to a deal. I'm gonna start to plagiarize myself in a version of this joke that I also made on social media, but just for a listener service here, if you're looking for who to blame for this federal government shutdown, I can forward you about 3 trillion emails to help you make up your mind. My inbox runneth over. Sarah, you covered a Davenport area protest related to the shutdown. Obviously one that was coming at this from a certain viewpoint, but it sounds like the folks who turned out there were encouraging Democrats to hold the line on the healthcare policy and funding debate in this particular shutdown. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so a couple dozen people, including some physicians, gathered outside of the downtown Davenport congressional offices for Southeast Iowa's U.S. Representative Mariannette Miller-Meeks and U.S. Senators Chuck Grassley and Joni Ernst also have offices there. That's been a popular spot for protests here in the first several months of the Trump administration. And this week, a couple progressive groups organized a group of physicians to come out and talk about why they supported the Affordable Care Act subsidies. And like you said, encouraging Democrats to hold the line and encouraging Republicans to sit down and make a deal with Democrats to reopen the government. This is just, one example of progressive groups trying to put some pressure on Republicans, especially in vulnerable districts such as, Mariannette Miller-Meeks' district. They had 3 or 4 retired physicians. One physician, Jim Kettlecamp, he talked about how he had seen the importance of the Affordable Care Act to his patients, just seeing improvement in access to medications and that were previously out of reach. And he was able to see them more regularly in the clinic rather than, more going to the emergency room for their care. And another person there pointed to the Iowa Insurance Division has posted on its website that premiums for marketplace purchased health insurance carriers have filed for rate increases ranging from 12.6% to more than 25%. And then Mariannette Miller-Meeks, as Tom Barton reported, was on a call last week with reporters, and she talked about how she believes that these ACA tax credits are really just bailouts for insurance companies, and that she's more focused on lowering healthcare costs by promoting more transparency and competition in the system.
Althea and Todd, I'm gonna put you guys on the spot here. I didn't, full disclosure for our listeners, I didn't put this in our script, but as I hear Sarah, I'm kind of curious, and as I joke about those emails, I won't ask you guys to debate the debate that the Congress is having over who's to blame for this shutdown, but I am curious what either of you think about the long-term impacts of this, especially when it comes to voter sentiment and or the election roughly a year from now. How voters may or may not see this or may or may not care about this by the time we get to next November, because we've been through this before, and that's always the concern that you can tell that the congressional leaders have, is they don't want to be blamed for the federal government shutdown because those are, generally speaking, unpopular. But will that be the case this time around? And if it will, who do you see bearing the brunt of this. I'm curious what either of you have to say about that.
So the shutdown, I've heard about that. It's in all the papers. I think as this goes on, Americans are going to run into more and more sort of inconveniences and problems that they didn't know were going to be caused by the shutdown. So that I think as time goes on and people find that out, they're going to lose their patience. Democrats want to talk about health care, and they're talking about health care. And I think, considering that the ACA premium assistance is pretty important in a lot of red states, especially to farmers who can afford coverage through the ACA. I mean, this is not some intangible problem that people don't understand. I think people understand that if their health premiums go up maybe double at the end of the year, it's going to be very difficult. And I think the whole argument that Democrats are shutting down the government to give health care to illegal immigrants is, I think it's kind of beyond the base. I think it's kind of wearing thin. I'm not sure people believe it anymore. But that said, they need to figure out a deal. And Democrats don't want to take this too far because I think they see advantages, political advantages in the big beastly bulging bill or whatever you want to call it. And they don't want to muck that up by forcing a continued shutdown that sort of becomes a political liability for them. They don't want to mess up the trail they're on, I guess.
So the seriousness of healthcare premiums going up, when it comes to campaigning and elections, you got to think about timing. That's a huge one. And of course, it wouldn't be a campaign or an election if you didn't offer spin. That being said, what I've always noticed in politics is that when it comes to the debate on healthcare costs, to Sarah's point about the popular protests happening outside the offices where Grassley and Miller-Meeks and Ernst have offices, that's always been kind of premiums are going to skyrocket, costs are going to skyrocket. That's always been kind of imminent reality versus the other side of taxpayers saying, these costs are skyrocketing and because the government is subsidizing them, and we don't want to be subsidizing healthcare if it's actually going to cost this much. We don't want to be kicking the can down the road. That's always been kind of a general reality, not necessarily as imminent. So you've got imminent versus general reality. The thing is, when it comes to funding the government in order to pay for those subsidies and determine whether or not those subsidies should continue, that's when, funding the government and keeping it open all of a sudden becomes an imminent reality in and of itself. So the affordability cost here is definitely front and center because even the Washington Post came out with an editorial basically saying we've got to talk about the actual affordability of healthcare. Why would premiums start going up and up and up if we don't come to some compromise and continue subsidies? Because right now, the United States government, and aka the United States taxpayer, is putting so much money into subsidizing the cost of healthcare, what some would argue is for the sake of making sure that Americans don't understand actually how expensive current law makes healthcare. It's a little bit more complicated than just, oh no, our premiums are going to go up, because this is a battle that actually has been brewing, I would say, since the Affordable Care Act passed in March of 2010, which was over 15 years ago now. We've had additional subsidies that were given in the wake of COVID. These are what are expiring. If these expire and are not agreed upon, according to the compromise that people are saying needs to be reached, that's why healthcare premiums are going to go up. It's obviously going to be dangerous for Republicans because it's technically on their watch. Trump in the White House, Republican. You've got Republicans controlling both the Senate and the House of Representatives. So they're going to have to be on the defensive if and when healthcare premiums do go up. Again, that's where we get down to the timing of the election and each party's ability to spin not only whose fault it is, but who has a better plan to tackle the actual cost of healthcare.
Yeah.
I mean, healthcare premiums were high before the ACA, and tens of millions of people didn't have health insurance who now have health insurance thanks to the ACA, and the subsidies allow them to afford it because many times, many people that are independently employed, people that don't have work, plans at work, they find that it's prohibitively expensive to buy private insurance. And, I think things would be a little different too if the other macro factors would be, lining up for the Trump administration, but cost of living isn't really going down. There's just all sorts of things that were promised, and people are getting frustrated with the fact that things have not got appreciably better, as for the cost of how they live. I think, Republicans are going to have to, as Althea said, defend this record, but I don't know that if putting up a flow chart explaining to people this is why premiums are high and it's all part of this large fiscal problem. if they can't go to the doctor, I don't know how much they're going to be like, okay, well, I'm sacrificing to make sure that healthcare, it doesn't cost the government too much.
No. Last thing we wanted to get to, speaking of the shutdown and members of Congress maybe having a little more time on their hands. One thing it sounds like Eastern Iowa Republican Congresswoman Mariannette Miller-Meeks will not be doing during the shutdown is holding any public town hall events. In a video that surfaced this week, Miller-Meeks could be seen telling a meeting of the Johnson County Republicans that she will hold a town hall, quote, when hell freezes over. That story broke after our Tom Barton had already reported that Miller-Meeks had been defending her lack of town halls this far. I believe she talked about that on a conference call with reporters. Tom, so Miller-Meeks has sort of avoided the topic in the past, kind of talked around the question, but between your story and then this video surfacing, this seems pretty definitive that we won't be getting any Mariannette Miller-Meeks town halls anytime soon. Is that fair?
Well, you would think so, but she continues to send mixed messages about this.
Okay.
So she later told CBS 2 that she's still engaging with Iowans through phone calls, emails, community visits, and then said that she would. So they asked her, about the hell freezes over quote, which again makes it seem pretty definitive she's not going to do a town hall. But in her response to CBS 2, and she also mentioned this last Friday in a conference call I was on with other reporters, and again said that she would still do town halls like she's done in the past, but hasn't said when she would do one. So it's still on the up in there. Who knows? But the episode really underscores kind of a bigger shift we're seeing in modern politics, and particularly in competitive districts like Iowa's 1st District. So Congresswoman Miller-Meeks has faced growing pressure all year to hold a traditional public in-person town hall. She promised to do one back in April, still hasn't happened. Then, as you mentioned, this video surfaces from her August meeting with the Johnson County Republicans. That was posted by the county GOP on YouTube. I think that video has since been taken down, and it went unnoticed until recently. It came as she complained that she's already being hounded by questions over Medicaid cuts in the GOP's massive funding and policy package, the so-called One Big Beautiful Bill, which some independent analysis suggests could cause millions to lose health insurance coverage. It's a sensitive issue in a district with significant rural health and hospital concerns. Again, she tells a local news station here in Eastern Iowa that she's still engaging with Iowans, again, through phone calls, emails, telephone town halls, community visits. But those are far more controlled settings. They don't replicate the give and take or accountability that you get in kind of a true public town hall where anyone can kind of show up and ask a question. And to be clear, some of her Republican colleagues have held those kinds of events this year and paid a political price for it in the moment. I mean, we all remember Senator, Joni Ernst now infamous, well, we're all going to die, responding to a question about Medicaid cuts. Representative Ashley Hinton has also faced tough crowds at town halls. So has Senator Chuck Grassley, where they've been heckled and booed and shouted at by constituents, angry again about different pieces of the One Big Beautiful Bill. And so, there's a sense that Miller-Meeks has seen, what happened to them and decided, why invite that same kind of confrontation in one of the most competitive House districts in the country? The broader context here is that in-person town halls have, become rarer as politics has gotten more polarized and social media has made every tense moment a viral clip. Again, we're all aware of what happened to Republican Senator Joni Ernst. And so it seems like lawmakers increasingly favor, kind of controlled access, these telephone town halls, these invite-only roundtables, to stay on message and avoid, spectacle. But the trade-off is avoiding those open forums shields members from tough public pushback. But again, it also cuts them off from kind of the raw, unfiltered feedback that kind of used to, again, shape their understanding of what voters are feeling. And so for Miller-Meeks, the calculation may be that avoiding a shouting match keeps her campaign focused and disciplined. But in a district where she won by fewer than 800 votes in the last cycle, the "when hell freezes over" quote, I think, is going to stick, and it kind of feeds directly into a Democratic narrative that she's ducking accountability and that she's inaccessible.
That approach that she's kind of taking is very much in line too with the way Randy Feenstra has kind of held events as well. He does do events in all of the counties in the district, but like the one in Sioux City was at the Chamber of Commerce headquarters. And so it was a smaller room with only, a handful of people in it. So that's kind of the flavor on our side of the state.
Yeah. And I believe Iowa's other congressional representative, Zach Nunn, has also been asked this question. And I believe he said that he is not going to do town halls, or at least, unlike Mariannette Miller-Meeks, hadn't publicly committed to doing one and then kind of, reversing course and again sending mixed messages here.
Really well summed up of the kind of essentially pros and cons, Tom, in there of this. There's so much more we could talk about this, and I think we probably should. I make a pledge to our listeners that I'll bring this back for a future episode of the podcast, because we could keep going on this topic. And like I said, we probably should. I think we should flush it out. And we've talked about it in the past too, but given that here we are with it back in the news again this week with Congresswoman Miller-Meeks, I think it merits talking more about. But I'm looking at the clock and I got to get us moving. So I pledge to y'all, this feels like a stop halfway through this discussion point. We'll come back and finish it off, I promise. Before we sign off this week, I also have to cut us off because I have an exciting announcement to share with our listeners. So next week's episode will be the first in a series of one-on-one interviews with newsmakers in Iowa politics and government. And our first interview episode, again coming to you next week, is with Iowa House Speaker Pat Grassley. Earlier this week, I interviewed Speaker Grassley for about a half hour, and we covered a number of topics, both on the personal level and about his tenure as House Speaker, and some news of the day stuff as well. So I think we covered a lot of different interesting topics, had a great conversation. So we hope you tune into that next week, and that will be the first of hopefully many of those kinds of episodes, which we'd like to start kind of occasionally sprinkling in with our normal reporter roundtable format here. So again, join us again next week to hear my interview with Iowa House Speaker Pat Grassley, and stay tuned for more of those in the future. I can tell you that the wheels are already spinning on our next interview subjects. That's going to do it for this episode of On Iowa Politics. If you're not already, please subscribe to us on your streaming service of choice or on YouTube, where you can also smash that like button. And you can find the podcast in each and every week also on your preferred Gazette or Lee newspaper website. And now that you've listened to the On Iowa Politics podcast, make sure you're also subscribed to the On Iowa Politics newsletter, where every morning in your inbox you'll receive all the latest politics and government coverage from our team. You can subscribe to that free newsletter at the Gazette's website, thegazette.com. And lastly, don't forget that the work of everyone you heard here today can be found on the pages and websites of the Quad City Times, Muscatine Journal, Cedar Rapids Gazette, Waterloo Cedar Falls Courier, Mason City Globe Gazette, Council Bluffs Daily Nonpareil, and the Sioux City Journal. For the whole gang, Tom Barton, Maya Marchel, Hoff, Sarah Watson, Jared McNett, Althea Cole, Todd Dorman, and our producer Bailey Chehan, I'm Erin Murphy. Be well, everyone, and be good.